Today we're going to be speaking with Luke Beasley, host of the Luke Beasley Show, longtime on again, off again David Pakman Show correspondent. You know, Luke actually found himself in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday, interviewing folks at the time of the failed assassination attempt against Donald Trump. We actually have a little bit of video of that we're going to play for you here.
Biden's a capitalist. What are you talking about? He's a capitalist. He's a socialist.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, it is.
What is that?
All right, we are in, where are we? Butler, Pennsylvania, at a Trump rally, and everyone's running away because we think we just heard gunshots. As you can see, everyone's running away there. And we have no idea what's happening right now.
The president, go that way. Somebody, he says he's bleeding from his ear. Go that way. Trump is bleeding from his ear. Somebody was shooting.
Y'all don't know what happened? No. Assassination attempt, I think, or shooting. 3 gunshots. Hey, come on!
So what people are saying, we have not confirmed this yet, but is that Trump was shot in the ear. But we're still waiting to get more information.
So Luke, listen, that is extraordinarily intense video. I mean, just to start with and walk through this, when you got to the rally, was it just like any other Trump rally you've been to? Was the security any different? Some people said it was scaled back in some way. Did you notice anything different about security?
Didn't notice anything differently, except for in reflecting, one of the things that people have been saying, he sort of referenced it there, is, well, surely this is because they didn't have enough resources there. That had to be the issue. But as is the case with any of these events, a Biden event or a Trump event, there's security everywhere, Secret Service everywhere, law enforcement everywhere, which I think gets to why I have a hard time believing this was a lack of resource. And it feels like there had to be some sort of lapse, mistake, miscommunication, miscoordination for what happened to have happened, because there was still a massive law enforcement presence. And that always causes a logistical nightmare to get into the event. And so that was clearly present, which makes the tragedy that much more tragic.
In the video we saw, when the shots ring out, you seem to be kind of on like a dirt path of some kind or a gravel path. And tell us, is that true? It seemed like you were right in the middle of just doing one of your normal interviews. Where were you in reference both to the stage and the shooter?
So often, because of how many cameras and microphones, Secret Service isn't hyped about us going in through the magnetometers actually into the event. So we were right before you would enter into it. And you're right, it was a gravel path conducting a normal interview. And as you could see in the video, it just took a long time to figure out what exactly was happening. And initially the thought, I think, for most people was that fireworks. And because we were just far enough, we couldn't see what was going on the stage. Really, we were just reacting to the crowd reaction, which gets to something I may get into in more detail later, which is just the phenomenon of a mass crowd crisis event and how quickly misinformation about what's happening, how quickly that spreads around and confuses everybody. But we were just on the outsides. That made it even more confusing because we couldn't see the stage.
At some point, were you able, before you left, to see the location of the shooter relative generally to where the stage was and get like an in-person sense of how close the two were to each other? Like, we know it's I think they said 130, 160 yards, but being there, did you get a sense of how far this looks?
So as we were in the video, you saw sort of jogging away. The parts we didn't get when we stopped recording was when we would sort of stop and look around, talking to people, what's going on right now. And one of the things that we did take note of was, okay, as we're figuring out that this was probably an assassination attempt and not some sort of mass shooting of the crowd, which was our initial thought for some reason, then we started looking around at where the wannabe assassin, the shooter, would have been. And our thought was surely, because we didn't know it was that building, but you could see it so closely. And so it was surely it's not that building, because that would be the most obvious place where they would definitely clear off. you would expect even law enforcement to be up on that roof based on the past events I've seen, just given that it really was in person, so close, and such a clear, uh, you know, a clear, I don't want to say shot, but that's what it ended up being to the stage. You could see very clearly from the stage to that building.
How long was it when you go fireworks, mass shooting, assassination attempt? That knowledge, how many minutes did it take?
So I think you saw in the video for the audience the shift between, for a lot of people, fireworks and shooting. And then between, is this just a mass shooting of the crowd or something different? Quite some time, because I think there wouldn't have been necessarily an evacuation so quickly if everyone knew what had really played out. Because very quickly, the Secret Service were able to neutralize and kill the shooter. So then it was safe again. But I guess there was the question even then of there being an additional shooter, at least that concerned. So I'd say it was 20 minutes, half an hour for a lot of people, because the internet reception was really bad, to figure out that it was safe where we were. Immediately, people started storming out of, and I think you saw some of this on the video,
Yeah.
out of the event territory. And that, I think, plays into people thinking this, not knowing what was going on. But then, to my earlier point, what was fascinating in sort of a dark and unfortunate way was just how many different certain stories I was hearing as we were making our way out, talking to other people. People saying, no, I'm certain he was shot in the chest, or I was certain that he's still laying out on the stage and it
He
looks
being
like he's
Trump,
passed away.
right?
He being Trump, right?
Yeah.
And I am certain there were two different shooters and there were 15 shots that went off, and just all of that type of stuff. To me, because I've never been in this type of situation where you're in a large crowd as a crisis happens, informed me on how it's so understandable that sometimes the press will get all these conflicting reports about what
Yeah.
people are seeing on the ground. That was very noticeable.
There were, on video, there was this moment that was confusing where right after the shooting happened, there was sort of like, you could sense a group in the crowd being angry and yelling at someone. It's later been reported that it was kind of yelling at the media and saying, you caused this sort of stuff. Did you notice anything like that? Did anyone yell at you at any point? Or do you have any thoughts on that aspect of it?
So right after, I will be honest, in our conversations with people, interestingly, right after we went probably a mile away trying to get cell service to just some random pub, bar, a little while or a little bit away from the event. And there I did feel pretty uncomfortable, knowing that if anyone knew who I was or asked for specifics about who I was, they would feel some sort of rage towards me, which logically wouldn't make sense because
Right.
we're as opposed to this violence as anyone else. And this gets into the immediate response on the ground from people is the same thing playing out across the internet and right-wing media, etc., which is trying to unfortunately use this situation, regardless of the facts, because we're getting facts that indicate it's probably not even a left-winger, but to further exacerbate tensions, to further divide people and generalize or connect the shooter to, oh, that's the Democratic Party. They did that just like they tried to prosecute Trump. And so that response that we're seeing play out more broadly was the immediate response from people on the ground too, of wanting even more revenge and feeling like this was something that Biden should be blamed for.
Has this made you rethink going to these events? I don't know if it's 20 or 50 or 100 of these that you've been to so far. I know it's a lot. What's your thought about going to future ones?
No, people always ask, even before this, that sort of question, does it feel unsafe? And my answer has often been, oh, there's nowhere that's safer because there's so much law enforcement present,
Right.
or law enforcement presence. And that is a confusing prospect, like I mentioned earlier, given what ended up taking place. But no, I don't think so. For me, what's far more scary is as more of these videos get more views, the prospect of someone being really upset with me and recognizing me is a little bit more frightening, as sometimes happens, just because they it's sort of their dream to come across me here and then give me a piece of their mind. So that's more intimidating than an event like this happening again. But definitely still shocked by what happened.
This is going to sound so silly, but it's actually, I've just been reading a book that kind of relates to this. Do you ever, what about altering your appearance in subtle but effective ways? And there's so many different ways to do it, whether it's hair, eyebrows, I don't know. Like, is it the sort of thing where you would say, I want to figure out a way to keep doing it in order to allay some of those fears? Or you're considering, I don't know if this is really the right thing for me?
No, I think it's too, even in the moment, but then definitely in people's viewing of it, just too engaging and fascinating to stop going altogether.
Wow.
I've never thought of a disguise, to be honest. That's a new thought I'm gonna have to consider. One thing I don't like, which is why I try to rarely do this style of interviews, with love to anyone who does it this way. I hate the idea of sort of misleading. You see some people who will sort of pretend like they're on board to get them
Yeah.
to say something crazy. I try to be pretty upfront, and maybe a disguise would make me feel even more like I'm misleading them, but that would be interesting, maybe even more fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about dressing like a clown necessarily, but I just mean,
Just a
subtle,
mustache or
subtle sort of
something.
things. So let's get back to the aftermath. So we see a bunch of it in the 70-second clip we played at the top of the interview. You eventually get out, you go to a pub that's nearby. What's the scene at the pub? Everybody knows what's going on and where it went on?
So for quite some time, anyone walking the mile, I think that it was in between where the rally was taking place to the pub, a lot of people were just trying to find somewhere with cell reception to tell their family they were okay, and in our
Gotcha.
case, trying to get in contact with the person who was going to take us home. And so there was still a lot of confusion, but it was the pub where the TVs were on and they had Wi-Fi. And so that's where everyone just surrounded around the bar and just watched the TV. And so similarly to all of you, if you immediately jumped on and watched the TV reporting about it, we were getting the exact same information for the first time in actually understanding what happened. And so it was just a whole group of people surrounding the bar TV and being informed on what we just witnessed and experienced.
Was there any information that started kind of being passed around in the pub environment that ended up being completely wrong from the conversations you overheard?
Mm. I will say the pub environment was where everything started to get clarified because they had
Ah,
a couple different outlets reporting on what was going on. One thing that everyone has heard was it was a teleprompter, piece of shrapnel actually was the thing that hit the air. That ended up not being the case. So that was something everyone thought could have been the case. But no, it was more so right after it, people getting to their cars and standing around trying to decide if they were going to leave or what was going to go on, and hearing what people were saying very authoritatively about what took place. And some people saying he's passed away. We saw it. He's done. You know, he had been killed, Trump, that is. And that turned out not to be the case, luckily. And then some other just random details of how many shooters, where Trump was originally shot, if someone in the crowd had been hit, stuff like that was wrong until we got informed at the pub.
this next question maybe is more relevant to when you were still at the event in the kind of aftermath and starting to get out and everybody trying to figure out what was going on. There was this very brief moment where, MAGA Mike Johnson says we need unity, and all of a sudden everybody's doing very empathetic interviews with the people that were there, and everybody's kind of friends and united. And it was so brief. And then all of a sudden, all of the crazy politicking just went right back. They're raffling off an AR-15 at the RNC, despite the fact that that's the type of firearm that was used here. All this crazy stuff, everything's kind of back to it. Trump's posting his stuff on Truth Social. Was there any moment there where all of a sudden the very palpable divisions in worldview between you and these Trump supporters that you've now experienced at dozens of these rallies evaporated? Was there any moment of that while you were there?
No, but also I didn't get the experience of seeing how they would respond to the fact that I am not on their side ideologically, because for all the people we were spending time with in the aftermath, we didn't take note of that and
I
just
see.
sort of interact as if we were also in the audience, or left it neutral. So I didn't get to see how they react, but unfortunately, I will say the ideology does go deep, because even before people had gotten their signals from right-wing media, there was this instant rage towards Biden. I kept hearing Biden, see, he tried to take him off the ballot. He tried to get him out of the race through prosecutions, and now he tried to kill him. And in the moment, of course, as you've been reporting on your show as well, it's just how could that possibly be the same individual? And is there any evidence Biden has any involvement? Of course not. Immediately trying to lower the temperature, even the opposite of what they were thinking. But it shocked me. I always sort of had the feeling that people needed to be told by right-wing media certain things to then go out and express them, especially something as provocative as the left as a whole tried to do this, even as it's a registered Republican. But actually, they're primed enough to instantly jump into that sort of thinking. So that was actually really depressing.
Do you have any different experience or belief about or opinion about this incident by virtue of the fact that you were there? And the reason I ask is most people who are aware of and weighing in on what happened weren't there. You happen to have been there. And there's a question, this comes up when people weigh in about, should we be in a particular war or whatever? You unless you were there, you don't really, in this particular case, I mean, is there really any difference at all that you can articulate by the fact that you were there and lots of the other people commenting on it like me simply were not there?
As a general rule, I don't like when people make such an argument. You had to be there, because I think most of the time you can just be rational, observe the facts that you can, and come to a correct conclusion, even if you haven't been in the exact situation being discussed. And that stands for this too. The only thing is I have seen not elected Democrats. I just appeared on Piers Morgan's show a couple days ago.
I saw that.
Yeah, debating with a guy just sort of talking about this. And I don't like seeing, even though it's not coming from elected Democrats, which was the point I kept making on Piers Morgan, a difference between powerful Democrats denouncing this universally and powerful Republicans joking whenever it was Democrats being attacked. And so there's a contrast there, but there still are people on our quote unquote side, however you would define it, who are making light of it. And I think the most accurate thing I could say about being there that makes my stance unique or informed it in any way was just, even though I'm arguing with most of the people in those interviews, it's still often so friendly, as you've seen, laughing. And I was actually laughing right before it happened. And people are getting their hot dogs and just sort of talking with their family, and kids are there. So experiencing it that viscerally makes me even more upset, even though I'd already be.
Yeah.
When people make light of it, because we would not accept that in any situation, and we shouldn't accept it in this one. So that would be my only thing. But otherwise, I think people's responses are about the same as mine.
Very trivially, Luke, before I let you go, understanding this is a transition, how bad in general is the food at these rallies, and how bad are the Sanny cans?
I honestly don't know what the second thing is that you said.
Oh, porta potties.
Oh, okay.
Might be a Northeast thing that we call them Sanny cans.
I have to say, you named the two things that are top of the list for me to avoid when I go to these events. So I don't think I've ever eaten a piece of food from one of these rallies, so I couldn't tell you. And I try to make sure that I'm completely restroomed out before we get there.
Got it. All right. Luke Beasley, host of the Luke Beasley Show. You can find his YouTube channel at, actually, we have a shortcut at davidpakman.com/Luke. Luke, thanks for talking to us, and obviously glad that you're safe.
Thanks, David.